I know this is not a new book, and this has probably been said 1,000 times before, but here I go anyways. Hello everyone, my name is Al, and welcome to my channel Sectum Psycho, where I talk about everything literature related, and aesthetics, and dark academia, and anything that is interesting to me. So if you want to follow my journey, you can follow or subscribe to my channel and give it a like. And I'm new to this, so we'll see how it goes. I want to talk about Donna Tartt's debut novel, The Secret History, that was published in 1992. So, I finished reading it yesterday. I know. And I decided to make a YouTube channel just to talk about this book. If you have not heard of this book before, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of what it's all about, so you have somewhat of an idea what actually happens and why I think it's so good. A lot of people have read this. You might have read this. You have probably read this. And the reason that I'm pointing that out is it's not a new book. But since reading it and since saying that I've read it, tons of people came up to me and said that it's their favorite book. And that was really intriguing to me because, as I said before, this book came out in 1992. So how has it managed to still be people's favorites after 2 decades? So this book is by a female author. She's called Donna Tartt, and as I said, it was published in 1992. It was her first novel, and it was an instant success. She wrote 2 other novels that you might know. One is called The Goldfinch, and the other one is called The Little Friend. So now onto what actually happens in this book. I'm gonna fiddle around with it some more because it calms me down. The Secret History is a first-person narrative book told by Richard Pampin, our main character, one of our main characters of the story. Pampin is a 28-year-old man narrating the story in this book, and it's a story concerning his life when he was a teen and his friends in his teens. So when he was 19, he decided to move from California to Vermont to go to this Hampden college to study there. Upon arriving at Vermont, he meets Edmund Corcoran, also known as Bunny. He meets Henry Winter, Francis Abernathy, and Charles and Camilla Macaulay, who are fraternal twins. The students are all enrolled to study classic Greek. Richard does not get into the program, but after a while, he manages to convince the professor called Julian to teach him as well, and he gets into this group, and that's where things kind of set off. The Secret History is a novel that explores conditions of detachment that are represented by these 6 students in this Eastern private college that is very almighty, and the students as well, they are very wealthy and they come across very, like, they have a lot of class and how they carry themselves. Richard is immediately taken aback and like fascinated by them. The story is actually a tale of murder and concealment, and it is combined with lack of remorse and redemption, and it's very, very far from a traditional coming-of-age novel. It is kind of a critique of the negative potential of postmodern society, and it provides a means of coping with the fears and anxieties in society, basically. So from this point on, I'm gonna spoiler you, so spoiler warning, click off this video if you don't want to continue. So what really fascinates me about this book is that it starts off with this sentence. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. He'd been dead for 10 days before they found him, you know. It was one of the biggest manhunts in Vermont history. State troopers, the FBI, even an army helicopter. The college closed, the dye factory in Hampden shut down, people coming in from New Hampshire, upstate New York, as far as away as Boston. So what you realize is that the first paragraph you read is basically the whole story. The author tells you who dies and who kills the person. It just grabbed my attention. I wanted to know what happened. Why is he telling us this so casually? What is going on? We have Richard Papen. He's a very observant outsider, constantly analyzes his behavior He comes to this college and he's very a fish out of the water. He's placed in an environment and that is completely unfamiliar to him. He changes himself as well to fit the narrative of this group of classic Greek students. He lies about his past, he lies about his socioeconomic status, about his lower class status to fit the others, because all of the other students are very wealthy. They are very classy, they have expensive clothes, they carry themselves with a very fascinating and they just know that they're better than you, basically. He is a very unreliable narrator, so the whole book is out of his perspective, and he tells the story how he knows the truth. And a lot of facts contradict each other, and you realize that how he portrays the characters might not be how they actually were, but that is what is also very fascinating about the story. Because Richard is such an unreliable narrator, you can just think of what could have happened behind the scenes. So next in line is Henry Winter, and I think he's probably my favorite character in this novel for several reasons that I will go into later. He's very like the classic cold but charismatic mastermind. He has very large character flaws, but it makes him interesting, obviously. He's kind of the anti-hero and he's very sociopathic. He doesn't really seem to care for his actions or the consequences of his actions. And through the novel you discover that he's very much the chess master and he has every string in his hand. He leads the others, he's the leader of the group, and everyone loves him, but everyone is also kind of afraid of him. Apart from that, he's very smart, very wealthy, very upper class. He's grown up rich, a man of wealth and taste. He's very much like, screw the rules, I have money, I can do whatever I want. He's rather impractical sometimes because he's very detached from whatever is happening around him in the real world. Not in his world, not in his class, not in his little friend group. Outside of that, he's very detached. He's very unable to relate to the mundane worries of the shallow personalities and of the usual people, or like the people around him and other faculties or like other majors. One really funny like paragraph in the story is when they talk about the moon landing and Henry actually doesn't know that it happened. Very detached and crazy that he doesn't know this because he's so smart and he just doesn't seem to care about the real world. He also frequently says that he doesn't like technology and he just wants to live somewhere far off where no one can reach him. Now onto our third character, Edmund Bunny Corcoran. I love all the names the author has invented because they fit the character so much. Anyways, his nickname is Bunny. That's what they usually call him. Everyone calls him Bunny except like his parents, or Julian calls him Edmund and all of that. And he's basically an asshole. But he enjoys crushing people for the fun of it, and he kind of comes from a big screwed up family, and he's a terrible scholar, but a very gifted artist, and he's an astute observer, which later becomes fatal. He knows too much. He knows too much, but the thing is, he doesn't hide that he knows too much. He lets everyone know that he knows too much, which makes him kind of stupid. Which makes him a target, basically. Because if others know that you know the dirt on them, they will try everything in their position to not get you to tell their dirt. Which is basically what the story is all about. He's very into conspicuous consumption. He only really shows it to show off that he has money. And he very much leeches off the people around him, especially Henry. On top of that, he is very sexist. He's very homophobic. Rude person, basically. Then the fourth person in our lineup is Francis Abernathy, which is probably my most favorite name in the whole story. I just love Francis Abernathy. It sounds so cool. He is ginger and he wears very outdated outfits and he seems like he comes from another century, and he's extremely fond of sporting it, which I love. He also comes from a big screwed up family. His grandpa was very iron-fisted. His mom and his stepdad are very absurdly youthful. It makes him kind of cringe. He is very brilliant. Multiple times through the novel you realize how brilliant he is, but he's very lazy. He's very gifted, a gifted scholar, but he lacks the motivation to get himself out of trouble or stand up to others, especially towards Henry. He doesn't really ever stand up to Henry, even though he has very much reason to. He's also wealthy, probably besides Henry the most wealthy of them all, and he has this upper class wit. He's really cheeky, and one of my favorite lines is when he asks someone if they should go to his room to sleep with each other in Greek and the person doesn't understand. Very great line. He is homosexual. We don't know if it's just gay or if he has like any other tendencies, if he's pansexual, if he's bisexual. We just know that he tends to hook up with guys. Everyone kind of knows it. Well, at least a friend group knows it, and it's never really discussed that much. Well, his family doesn't know because when his grandpa finds out that he is gay, he cuts him off the money. Moving onto the twins, Charles and Camilla Macaulay. First off, Charles, both the twins, they wear a lot of white. Richard frequently describes them as angels. Yeah, they have a very special relationship. The two are very different, even though they look very similar. In the beginning, you think that they are similar in the way they look and how they handle themselves, but when you get to know them more, you realize how different they are from each other. That their relationship gets very rough and abusive, and you realize that it's more than just normal sibling love. Now onto Charles himself. He has very depraved bisexual leanings. That is described when he hooks up with Frances, but like drinks alcohol and acts like he doesn't remember. Alcoholic tendencies, he gets very mad when people talk about those. And those are also very frequent in the story. That's why he's also very abusive towards Camilla. At one point, even like ripping her hair out and like hurting her and everything. And as I said, the two have basically it's twincest. They have sexual relations with each other. And he's very jealous when his sister is with other men. It's just really a very, very weird dynamic between the two. And Camilla as well, she's the only woman in this classic clique, and she's very intelligent, but for the most part she's really just being viewed as an object through Richard's eyes, because basically he never actually talks about her personality or her character or what makes Camilla Camilla, but he only ever sees her like through this soft focus film, and she seems like ethereal to him, like she's an angel, a goddess. He doesn't ever see her as a woman or like an equal. He just sees her as this object of lust and beauty, and yeah. She's probably the character we know the least about, which is really sad because I wish we had known more about her. And then the last character I'm going to go into is Julian Moreau. He is the Greeks teacher, and he's idolized by his students, especially by Henry, and he looks very much like the copy of every inspirational teacher from every movie ever you can imagine. He's a gentleman and a scholar, and he is very keen on immortality. He is very selectively oblivious, and he wants to believe the best in people, in everyone, until he is confronted otherwise. Yet, and I will also go into that later, I feel like his obliviousness kind of seems only to be a pretense. I don't think it is all there is to it, but as I said, I will go into it later. I will go into how I felt while reading it. So I must say I have never read a book like this in my entire life, and I know everyone always says this about every book ever. I mean, I'm here now, I'm talking about this book in a YouTube video, and I just made a YouTube channel to just talk about this book, and I will probably continue this if I ever read a book again that I am so fascinated with that I just read a whole script about why I like it so much. I still don't think I can really put into words how blown away I was by this book. And it really is a cathartic experience, which is very ironic considering what the novel is all about. And it's a Greek word. And overall, I know this is like every opinion ever, but it was one of the most unique experiences I ever had while reading a book. I really want to go into deeper significances and like things that are not very visual if you just take the book for what it is, but if you like do some research and read behind the lines. First of all, I want to go into Julian's character. He is not shown that often, like not as much as I thought he was going to be mentioned. And I think Richard really adores Julian, just like every other student, every other Greek literature student. He thinks that Julian is selectively oblivious towards things, and I think Richard kind of views him through this lens of love, kind of, and he doesn't really see the character behind for a long time. And I think Julian's facade is really only a pretense. I think he has a much deeper meaning in the story, especially towards Henry, which we don't see in the book. When Julian disappeared, after he found out that they killed Bunny, when Henry eventually killed himself, I was very shocked. I was like, how can he just kill himself because Julian left? Because he didn't care about Bunny's death or like any death. I don't think Henry would have cared necessarily if the police or who would have found out, but he cared that Julian found out, and he cared that Julian disappeared and that he was disappointed by him, and that's what really broke him. And I think Henry, who clearly hated everything in the real world, viewed Julian as a living representation of the old world, or the ideals that Henry adored. His love for Julian, I think, was more platonic, but I can also see that it could be romantic. I really feel like Julian actually pushed the students on purpose, because he took them out of the university. He kind of distanced them from any other students, made sure that they couldn't take any other classes with them. That Richard only had the French class that wasn't with him. I think there is a deeper meaning there, where he just detaches them from the uni and really pushes them into this cult behavior, like this cult kind of thinking, where they have like the Bachatan and everything. Especially Henry. He pushes Henry the most. And I think this is because we view everything through Richard's eyes. I think this is not talked about enough. We know that Henry and Julian on page 71 hold hands, and Henry even kisses Julian's cheek every now and then, which is also mentioned in page 71. This could be seen as platonic, but we know that the ancient Greeks were fans of older men educating younger men, not just about Homer. We also know that Henry is the only member of the group that has ever visited Julian's house. And, you know, I think these are all kind of the hints that there is more going on there, but we never really get to know what exactly happened. But there is one quote that really stuck with me, which is shortly before Henry commits suicide, and that is when he says, and he is in a relationship with Camilla at this point, when he says about Julian, "I loved him more than anyone in the world." And I think that Henry speaks about love, and specifically towards one person, really shows how much he actually cared for Julian, and how much the deeper significance of Julian in Henry's life. Now, moving on to Bunny, I think this is very, very interesting. We all find Bunny kind of gross, inelegant, and awful. I find it very interesting that despite, from the beginning, knowing that he was not a good guy, I really wanted to like Bunny. He was part of this group, and he was the first one that actually talked to Richard and took an interest in him and invited him into the group. That was the first step, and Richard really needed friends. He was very lonely. Then I thought to myself, is he really worse than the rest of the group? Bunny's main crime to the students, or like to the group, is that he's very dumb and unrefined. What really stuck out to me is that the group didn't seem to care about Bunny's obvious greed, homophobic and sexist comments, his bigotry, until he started blackmailing them with what he knew about them. The rest of the group isn't really that much better if you think about it, you know. Henry's a sociopath who kind of enjoys killing people, and Charles is a weak-minded alcoholic who has kind of unconsensual sexual relationship with his twin sister, and he also treats Frances really badly. So who really is the bad guy here? The more I read this book, the more I hated Bunny, obviously, and I think that is very much the goal of Donna Tartt, to make you hate Bunny, which for me she achieved. I found myself not even being too sad about Bunny's death, and that is crazy to me, because Bunny was a living person. He had dreams, he had aspirations. Like, obviously he was such an asshole towards everyone, but how is it that I didn't think his death was too bad? I think it's very fascinating how Donna Tartt writes her characters in that way, that you empathize for the group. You're like, oh yeah, sure, he blackmailed them, he was an asshole to them, they didn't have any other choice but to kill him. But that mindset, not a good one. Not a good one to have, not a normal one to have. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating how she just kind of turns the story from why would they kill him? I cannot stand with killers to, well, he was kind of bad, you know, I can understand where they came from. So what I also want to touch upon is the sexuality in this book, because a lot of the members of the group, at least to me, are very far from straight. I think the only character that I think might be 100% straight is Camilla. I'm not saying that the queerness in this book is kind of vilified or anything, but it is very, very, very far from showing it in its best light. We all know about Princess being gay, so I don't really want to go into that, but more about the repressed feelings of homosexuality or like queerness in this book. Richard, our main character, seems very conflicted about his sexuality. While reading the book, I constantly felt like he had to prove his heterosexuality to the reader. He described Camilla in great detail, which struck me very fascinated because the way he associated words with her could be seen as very masculine. Like, he describes her as having a masculine haircut and the boyish ankles, which, what even is a boyish ankle? Richard, what are you trying to tell me? Also about Bunny, I talked to my friend about this and she didn't really see this, but I always had this feeling about Bunny making so many homophobic remarks that could fit onto himself. Right in the beginning of the book, he says, when he takes Richard on a date out, basically, to the lunch at this fancy restaurant, and he remarks about their gay waiter, he just says, "Every gay person I have ever known has been obsessed with food. I wonder why is that? Something psychological?" He said that right before he ate lunch for 5 hours. So I think, I don't know if it was done on purpose, but there's the irony there of him just either being blatantly oblivious, which could match the character, him just being ignorant, willingly ignorant, or over-exaggerating his hatred towards non-straight people. He acts very passive-aggressive and resentful towards Henry more than any other clique member. And that is what really struck out to me. That's why I thought Bunny kind of had a crush on Henry. He became very clingy and possessive over Henry the closer Richard became to Henry. And also when Bunny convinces Henry to go to Italy with him on a trip alone to Rome, could be seen as a very like romantic thing, but obviously we know how that ended. It didn't end well, but still, I just think it's funny to me how it was shown. It doesn't have to mean anything, it's just my interpretation. It could just be him being a complete asshole, which, you know, is very likely. And this is a little excursion of my idea of the book. This is obviously just a thought that I had. And upon researching, I found in multiple subreddits that people had the same thought as me. I was like, did they actually kill the farmer? Because especially Camilla refers a lot to animals when she talks about what happened. There's also this scene when Richard and Francis drive their large car and see this large cat-like creature cross the street, and they have no idea what it could be. There are many animal references in this book, and I think this could be to symbolize that what actually ripped the farmer apart, because Camilla later says in gross detail that his belly was ripped open, that it could have been from an animal and not from the group, which essentially means that they killed Bunny for no reason, because they didn't actually kill the farmer, but they could not have known because they were in such a manic state. Just a theory. Just something to think about. I think that would be very tragic, obviously, but would fit the whole book and the whole idea of them kind of getting themselves, or like spiraling into this worst case scenario all the time, and digging themselves the grave deeper and deeper and deeper. It would kind of match. It would match, and could have just been that they stumbled upon the body, and Henry, when he says that he hit something, he just hit the animal and make the animal run away. I want to talk about some controversies that I saw pop up a lot when I looked at people reviewing the book, and one of them was about the relatability and the likability of the characters. A frequent complaint about this book is that the characters are all extremely unlikable, not diverse at all, which, fair point, they're all white, and 4 of the 5 are men. The one girl that they have is basically nothing but just a beauty, and that they are all absolutely annoying. Now, don't get me wrong, the book is full of terrible people. Pretty much the whole lot of them that our main character Richard meets are all awful in some way. It's just the truth. They are very self-centered, or atheist, or potheads, or sociopathic, or just people with really loud voices in the hallways, which, you know, could just be Richard exaggerating his own perception, which it's probably that. And even Richard himself, he's not exactly a great guy. The magic of this novel, and to me especially, is somehow, even though you do not relate to these characters at all, you find these terrible people deeply sympathetic. I too ask myself, how do I find them so charming? Especially Henry, he's such a sociopath. How do I find him this charming? And that is exactly the beauty of their characterizations, in my opinion. The normal person that is not part of this group does not, or should not at all, relate to them. That's what makes them so fascinating, because they are so out of reach and you just want to know more about them. The reader, us too, we just feel like Richard. We get thrown into this world and we are astonished by the detachedness and the ignorance of these young people, these young wealthy students, and we just get sucked into that. And I really like that. I really like this idea. And fair enough, you have to get into the book for the characters to grow on you a bit, I'd have to say. But in the end, that is just every book, really. You just have to give it time. And I think Donna Tartt really did an amazing job with the characterizations, because they are all essentially the same character, but they are so different from each other and so beautifully written that you can never switch them up. Another controversy, I'd say, is many people I saw that reviewed this book did not like the epilogue. When I first read the book, I wish that the book ended before the epilogue as well. And the epilogue seemed extremely underwhelming when I first read it. It just seemed disappointing and strange and felt weird. When I thought about it more, when I kind of let the book pass through my mind the whole day, and I grew to understand why the book didn't end with Henry's suicide. And let me just preface this by saying the ending in Greek heroes' tales normally goes like this. Murder taints everything. Blood is the only thing that can purify it. Wearing masks is very important, and death is just another mask that we put on. What I came to understand is that the epilogue pulls us back into real life and shows us that the whole story is not an aesthetic. It is not beautiful. It is not the bittersweet Greek tragedy ending that they thought it was going to be. I grew to love the epilogue, actually, because it is a letdown. It's sad, it feels out of place, it feels weird, and I think that's perfect, because I feel like if it had just ended with Henry's suicide and him dramatically falling down, we probably would have all romanticized what happened afterwards, or romanticized or dramatized what happened to all of the students afterwards. I think seeing their lives move forward the way they did made us realize that their ideas and beliefs of the perfect Greek tragedy life couldn't last. It showed how life after something that tragic and stressful and traumatic actually isn't dramatic or romantic. They aren't living in a classic. It's slow, it's boring, it's sad, and it's dull, which is exactly how the epilogue reads. See, the whole story is about privilege, about wealth, about anxiety, about fears, about ideas of a perfect, tragic Greek story. And that's why it is a postmodern Greek tragedy that ends with a realistic approach to life, which shows that it is not a Greek tragedy. It is just students that made a big mistake, those entitled, selfish, arrogant, wealthy, privileged students that go through this experience because they think it will change something dramatically in their lives, and all it does is make it worse. That is the end of my rant or talk about The Secret History. As you can tell, I'm absolutely fascinated by this book, about this novel. I never read anything like it. Please let me know what you think of it, if you agree with my statements, if you don't agree. Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you for watching my first video if you've made it this far. I've been ranting and rambling for so long. My phone has probably died multiple times, but anyways, if you want to see more of me talking about random books that I read and liked, hit the subscribe button. Cannot assure you when the next video will be because this is a very random decision. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I wish you a good night, day, wherever you are, and keep on reading.